Hello there, my name's Annette with Sunbeam Fabric Art. Welcome to my channel. Today we're taking a look at the end of the green scraps. As you might have seen recently, I sorted all my scraps this year by color for 2025. Let's get rid of these green scraps. I got a few suggestions from you viewers out there, and one of the ones that I'm going to use today is alternating a plain fabric with scrap blocks. I got 30 yards of this green fabric several years ago, and I'm still using it up, but I'm almost done with it. And I have this other dark green fabric that I thought might work for an alternate block too. I ended up going with the light green. I'll be making my scrap blocks, and then I'll be just doing those alternate blocks in the plain light green. I spent a little time pressing any little scrap units open that needed to be pressed and sorting these little scraps by size. Once they were all sorted, I started stitching them right sides together with the longest strips first. If there was a big discrepancy at the end of sewing two strips together, since I started with the longest strips first, I can cut that off and move it to one of the smaller piles. You might have heard me mention this in previous videos, but when sewing scraps together this way, the first round always takes the longest. Once I separated the chain from round one, I pressed these units open and kept them in the order by strip length. Next, I started round two, sewing strips together. Round two should take about half the time that round one took you. Well, I did not number the rest of the rounds here, but you can see I'm getting bigger and bigger units put together. At this point, I decided to make these blocks 8 inches. I started adding these 2.5 inch white strips to the sides of these scrap units to make them the 8 inch width that I wanted. I did have a pre-cut long strip or two of the 6 inch piano key border, and yes, by adding that 2.5 inch white strip, I got my 8 inch that I wanted. I also had some leftover 4.5 inch piano key strip unit and some 2 or 3 inch leftover piano key strip unit, so I put the white strip in between the two different widths of strip sets. But that did give me my 8 inch width that I was looking for. Once I got all these scraps assembled into strips that were at least 8 inches wide, it was time to trim these into 8 inch blocks. Feel free to slow this down if you want to see close-ups of these crazy scrap blocks that I've made. You can see there are a couple of units that were less than 8 inches, so I would just stitch those together until I got enough to make another 8 inch block. All of the blocks I ended up with had an element of a white strip on one side or the other. Originally I thought, well, I'll make almost like a little windmill, pinwheel type design, but I only had 32 of these 8-inch blocks. So I decided to come up with the alternate block so I could have an 8x8 layout. I made these sample blocks on my computer. I turned them around lots of different ways, but I ended up deciding on this layout. This way I'll be joining all the blocks together the same way. Then I will turn 2 rows, and those white strips that I added will be facing each other. Next, I grabbed that green fabric from my stash and cut 32 8-inch squares. Next, I made a stack of my scrap blocks with the white fabric facing all the same direction, with the green fabric next to it, and I'm just going to go from these 2 stacks, sewing them right sides together all the same way, and chain piece these. I've got a close-up here so you can see the foot I'm using. It's a 1/4 inch foot. It's got a little guide on one side, so I don't have to worry too much about getting a nice straight seam. Once I had the first set of blocks all stitched together, I separated that chain. Then I started sewing 2 blocks together with 2 more blocks to make a 4-block unit. And I'm making sure I'm keeping the white strip side of these scrap blocks oriented the same way. After that round, I've got units of 4 blocks wide. Now I'm going to separate those, and I'm going to stitch a unit of 4 blocks together with another unit of 4 blocks. That will make my complete 8-block wide row. Now it's time to join 2 rows together. I'm going to be using my clips to clip them into place. I'm double checking that I have these lined up where the white sides of the scrap block are facing the inside. Then I'm using my clips to hold nests in place. So what I'm doing here is nesting these seams between the blocks with one seam going one way, the other seam going the opposite way, and then these seams will catch and lock on each other, and I can clip that to hold it right where I want it until I get to the sewing machine. Now I've got all 8 rows clipped here in a stack of 4 groups. I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and sew all of these at once. Next, I clipped a unit of 2 rows together with another unit of 2 rows to get myself 4 rows. I clipped 2 more rows together with 2 more rows. And then before stitching this, I thought I had enough wiggle room here. I clipped that 3rd seam and just took this all to the sewing machine at one time. These clips were strong enough to hold these last 3 seams all together until I could stitch them all. Here is a look at that finished quilt top at the end. I've got 8 rows of 8 blocks each, nice square quilt. To make it larger, you could easily make the blocks larger or put a border on it. I like it just the way it is. I'll probably put some kind of really dark binding on this one. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope to see you back again real soon.